I'm not sick or struck dumb, or don't you know a kick when you see one can't quit? We're not done, we're gonna kick till the next one.
Hello, fine people, and welcome to The Kick. This here is a theme, scheme, and movie podcast on the Now Playing Network. I am Chance, your host. Hello. And we are rolling through our final kick of the year. This series is called 2024 Passion Projects, and my wonderful guests are nominating the films of 2024 that lit up their minds, climbed their best of lists, and that they still want to talk about months later. Today's episode is about The Substance, the body horror sleeper hit of late September that saw us all showered in blood, rethinking Demi Moore's legacy, and canceling our mail-order drug prescriptions. Here to discuss the star of our Challengers episode, a writer for Willamette Week, Alex Barr. Welcome back.
Yes, hello. Thank you so much, Chance. Great summation of that movie. That is spot on.
Thank you. I'm excited I'm glad that you picked this one. If you look at the movie landscape of 2024, especially where horror is concerned, it's a major player. So why don't we start there? Why would you consider The Substance your 2024 passion project?
Yeah. So lifelong horror fan. I, in college, spent my final year doing a capstone on horror during the Trump administration. So the second that I was hearing about the reaction at Cannes to The Substance, I was seated in that theater. I needed to be there immediately. It really was, for me, like the only movie of 2024 that lived up to the hype, like the hype of critics beforehand, and honestly, then some. It was, I felt like I walked out of that theater feeling like, to me, a good film is like a good essay. I really want to have a strong thesis. I want to have strong arguments. I want to have good sources to buttress what you're saying. That, to me, it just hit all of the marks for what I would expect out of a body horror.
Sure. What theater did you see it at?
I saw it at Cinema 21, actually.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I feel like in the movie discourse in September, people's reactions in the theater was a huge part of it, because it is a movie that just escalates and escalates and escalates, kind of beyond almost where you would think body horror could go. How was your crowd? How was your in-theater experience?
Yeah, so it was like one of the more intimate theaters. So I feel like it was like me and probably I want to say 30 other people at most, probably no more than that.
Okay.
It's such, you can really tell the pacing of a horror film has really hit the mark if the whole audience is kind of ebbing and flowing and screaming and hiding with each other. It seriously was such a communal experience. It was, and even some parts of it that were so uncanny and jarring that they were almost comedic.
Yes.
I feel like we got to experience all of that together, of kind of all of us nervously laughing, being like, what the hell is going on?
Yep. It's directed by a French filmmaker named Coralie Farge, who I think has only made one other movie, Revenge. I was curious if you had seen that one. I have not.
No, I haven't either. I wish I could bring something to this discussion, but
that's all right. This is both of our first.
I'm excited to check it out after this.
Both of our first Farges. I can picture the poster, and it's a woman covered in blood. So
remember that, saw the book's cover.
she has a thing that she's interested in, and it's beautiful people caked in viscera.
Yes.
So I'm going to jump in here with a little synopsis, Alex, and we have much to talk about. So The Substance, for those who haven't seen it or don't know or want a refresher, it is about an actor and television personality named Elizabeth Sparkle. And she's played by Demi Moore. And on the day of Elizabeth's 50th birthday, she's unceremoniously fired from her long-time job as a TV fitness celebrity. And she's been doing these sort of Jane Fonda-esque aerobics for the masses. And the repugnant executive, played by Dennis Quaid, who's always wearing these orange paisley suits and sticking his face too close to the camera, he pretty much screams out loud that he wants a younger woman for the show. And Elizabeth gets into a car accident. She spirals downward, An orderly at the hospital recommends to her a drug or a treatment called the substance that purports to create a younger, better you using your DNA as the matrix. And so then the idea is that the host and then the younger clone have to split time out in the world. Each one gets 7 days. And if that balance is not maintained, stuff starts happening to bodies. So Elizabeth, of course, goes through with it. And from this, gaping hole the length of her vertebra is born Sue, played by Margaret Qualley, a 20-something version of Elizabeth who almost immediately takes over the old workout show, makes it a hit. Sue skyrockets to fame, and that, of course, brings Elizabeth no joy, despite signing up for the substance. And now the two sides of the Elizabeth coin begin to detest each other more and more. And sometimes they call the substance hotline and they're to complain. And the guy on the other end of the line just says, "You are one person, figure it out," and hangs up. And what ensues from there is arguably the year's most graphic horror film. And it's a cautionary tale of trying to optimize these meat suits that we live in until they twist and mutate and explode.
People always ask for something new. It's inevitable. At 50, well, it stops.
Have you ever dreamt of a better version of yourself? Younger, more beautiful, more perfect. One single injection unlocks your DNA and will release another version of yourself. This is the substance.
I'm Sue. 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 Sue.
You're hired.
Let's go.
A perfect balance of 7 days.
Well, and I was even thinking about, as I was writing that out and I called it like a younger clone, I was like, is that even the right term? Because there is one of the most prominent features of Elizabeth's apartment is this giant picture of her from the workout show, I don't know, 20, 30 years before. And it's Demi Moore from the 80s, who doesn't look like Margaret Qualley. So I was curious, are we just like, should I just suspend my disbelief there? Or is there perhaps like some kind of suggestion that like what the substance creates is maybe not like what you looked like at a different time?
Yes.
What do you think?
Yes, no, I found that really fascinating because it very clearly, like, they could have found, kind of similar to what, oh my gosh, Blake Lively did for her latest film. They found a lookalike that was de-aged.
Yeah.
They could have found that very easily for Demi Moore. I feel like that would have been something that wouldn't have been that out there, or even doing a CGI, de-aging her kind of Star Wars style. There's so many ways that they could have gone about that I really do believe that this was a purposeful choice.
Yeah.
I must believe that this was done on purpose. And if that's so, that to me says that there's this younger version of ourselves that we hold in our head as we age, that even as a 26-year-old, I'll still look back a couple of years ago and say, oh, like that was better. There weren't wrinkles there. There weren't fine lines there. There wasn't cellulite there. But when I look back on it, I'm kind of creating a different version in my head now as an even slightly older mid-20s person. How I look back on my, college version of myself, it's not actually, I imagine, a one-to-one version. I think I'm creating a new version of my younger self in my head. And I think that we all do that, especially women as we age, but everyone does that. You have this idyllic version in your head that you think, oh, if I could just get back to that old version of me, I would be perfect. But in reality, that's all kind of a mirage. That person that we're creating in our head isn't actually who we used to be. It's kind of like our Sue.
Yeah.
Like it's a new beast entirely.
That's a really good explanation. And the movie seems to say that if they showed up right in front of you in your bathroom, you would be like, that's not me. Like,
Exactly.
and I'm not going to treat them as such.
Yes. Yes, exactly. It's so hard to see them as one because it's not you. It's like all of the idealized fantasies that you have about yourself, but it's also all ego. Sue
Mhm.
does not care at all for Elizabeth, and vice versa. But at least from Elizabeth's side of things, it's like, well, she kind of earned it because she screwed me by using too much of the substance.
Yeah.
And now I have this finger of an 80-year-old. So now I'm going to spite her back.
Yeah.
And then it just becomes this game of cat and mouse, but it's also, I think, exemplifying that it's an act of self-harm to go through this process with yourself.
Totally. How do you, maybe I'll start here. This could be a big question. Save space. Answer it any way you want. How do you feel when, we'll limit it to like actors or celebrities, clearly like undertake or augment their appearance as they age?
I want to comment on with Margaret Qualley versus Demi Moore, something that I think is so obvious between them. Obviously, Demi Moore has had work done, but the thing that's so obvious to me is that she has veneers. Like that's the one thing that
totally.
I take away. We have this new era of like veneer acting, and Margaret Qualley doesn't. It's something that I couldn't really separate. I was like, oh my gosh, that little gap that she has, also like her teeth don't look like they're like bulletproof. Like they also aren't like alarmingly white.
You're right. That's interesting.
But I also am like so fascinated by this very, I feel like, kind of cataclysmic moment that we're having in pop culture with specifically Lindsay Lohan. She has gotten something like completely redone. Like her face looks like what it looked like last year, literally like 12 months ago versus now. It's like it's like clone level of like shit. So I am so fascinated by it because everyone's reaction has been, this is fantastic. Like she looks incredible. Like this is the difference between getting work done and getting good work done. Like she's getting, I feel like for the most part, lauded by it.
Uh-huh.
But it's also so fascinating to me that there's just such an immense pressure for women especially, but for everyone in Hollywood, men and women and non-binary people, everyone is included in this, to be constantly chasing the dragon of, I want to look younger than I did yesterday.
Yeah.
When that's just a biological impracticality. Like that's illogical. It doesn't make any sense. This idea that we applaud people for literally going against your body's nature is so fascinating to me. And we can talk about how that's happened with men with these superhero roles, with the steroids, the Ben Affleck treatment. There's a lot to be said about how much nowadays with Ozempic, with plastic surgery, with, all of these things that are essentially the substance, how in this movie, it's making it very clear this is a horrific thing to do. This isn't a natural, horrific thing to do. But in real life, we're seeing it play out and people are cheering it on.
Yeah. The Lindsay Lohan thing is fascinating because I'm like, oh, she looks quote unquote better than the previous round of work. But now I'm like, she looks like a stranger to me, which I think just throws into sharper relief sort of like whatever gulf or gap there is between how the viewer sees the actor and how the actor sees themselves. And is like an impassable thing where this person is just like, no, I want to look younger and better until I no longer resemble that person at all, until Demi Moore becomes Margaret Qualley.
Yes, no, exactly.
Yeah, it's wild. And then the motivation will always be so opaque. Like I'll pick on a guy, I think like Ryan Gosling in The Fall Guy, just like has these super noticeable fillers in his cheeks the whole movie, and I stop as a kind of lunk-headed viewer and I'm just like, every guy I knew in college just wanted to look like Ryan Gosling. And if not even Ryan Gosling wants to look like Ryan Gosling, like what when is
Where
it? What
are
is it?
we?
Yeah, what is happening? And I don't totally mean that as a like indictment on the actor themselves, but I'm just more that like there's no logic to it.
How can anyone live up to these standards if the people who are the standard even are furthering themselves past that, or at least attempting to? They aren't happy with themselves.
Right. It's upsetting, I would
Oh
say.
yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, think about like the idea of like, I don't know, like Burt Reynolds or like, I don't know, an iconic older actor
I love the
getting
idea of
work
Burt
done.
Reynolds. Yeah.
Like just fillered out. Like as like a, not even an old person, like a 40-year-old.
Yeah. This sounds like very like desirous of me. It's just like I want to see you be beautiful, but I don't know. That's part of the conversation around this movie,
Yes.
where it's like you look at someone like I would shout Paul Newman, where it's just like
Yes.
someone who just ages so beautifully, and it's like you guys don't understand. You're already the most beautiful people in the world. You would have the opportunity to age better than anyone, and you don't take it.
Yes. It's like I can't blame you for having the same human trait of insecurity that I do, but
yeah.
I feel like if anyone should be insulated from it, it's celebrities. They should know that they're hot. You're literally paid to be hot. Like, I don't get it.
It's the opposite somehow. That's all right. Well, I'm glad we could break this down on a like philosophical names level. Let's talk about the performances in this movie, Alex. Margaret Qualley and Demi Moore are these roles that they're playing here are kind of in conversation with their careers. Like I think about Demi Moore just being like lionized for her like basically being famous for her body in the early 90s in Striptease and Indecent Proposal. And so this movie's in conversation with that, and a little bit of like Qualley as well, of this sort of like super bubbly like I think about her in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, kind of like leaning over the car and like being introduced as this sort of like oversexed, bubbly teenager. So
God.
But and yet I can't say I haven't seen either of the two of them give performances like these before. So what do you make of it?
No, so I would say I think one of the last things I had seen Margaret Qualley in before I saw this was Kinds of Kindness. And seeing that to this, it kind of, I mean, I was really struck by Margaret Qualley's acting and performance in this, just because there were so many layers to the performance that she had to give. And of course with Demi Moore too, but I felt like with Qualley, she really had this undertaking of understanding the underlying mechanics of what the substance does. I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall with the conversations with Farji to be like, so is it me, or is it like a daughter, or is it like an evil twin? Like, how should I be playing this as an actor? Like, do I love her? Do I hate her? Do I love and hate her? Like, where am I coming from? Where is my frame of mind? Because you can't empathize with a character that it has no lived human experience. They're literally by nature like Frankenstein.
Yep.
And so I was just so compelled and fascinated by Qualley in this, because I didn't ever have to suspend my disbelief for a moment with her. Like, I believed that she was Sue. It was so clear to me, like this drive, this passion, but also like beyond passion, like overwhelming, controlling need to be a star, to the point that she's willing to literally forego her health entirely to be on the cover of a magazine. It was fascinating, but I also had to just question, of course, with Demi Moore too on this, how much of this just felt like a caricature of themselves. Like, to be in on the joke like that, to be like, I'm aware that the reason I work so well for this role is because this is kind of what's actively happening to me in real life as a person. And to bring that to the performance and not shy away from that vulnerability, both of them, it was so fantastic for me. That was really what brought it home for me as like best picture of the year for myself.
On the press tour, yeah, you had things like Demi Moore coming out and talking about like how when she was making movies in the early 90s, she would just like go compulsively bike 20 miles a day or something to like try and get her body where she wanted it or where she felt people wanted it after having a kid. And just sharing these kind of like disordered body image stories. And then, you imagine the pain that she brings to bear on being like such a, I mean, Elizabeth Sparkle in the opening workout video, like and this is kind of goes to what we're talking about of like the self-blindness. It's just like, she looks amazing.
Oh my
looks fantastic.
God.
And not for 1 second does the character or anyone else in the world, well, actually, you know what? She meets that goofy guy from high school who says, "You're really beautiful." But it's not a consideration to Elizabeth at all that she looks amazing.
Yeah.
It's completely pushed over, but there is like some pain there.
Yes. Well, and it's that she has Elizabeth and with Sue. I think that this is what Farji, at least to me, is trying to highlight, is that if you have a external locus of validation, if your validation is dependent on other people, and not even just dependent on other people, but dependent on other people saying that you're beautiful frequently. Because if, as a young woman, you are going to get told that, it is told very often in a predatory way, in a way of like how Dennis Quaid is up against the lens of the camera practically. It's said like that, but there is this undertone of, this is what makes me valuable, is when people tell me that I'm beautiful. And as women age and as people age, you're just going to hear that less and less, because we always associate beauty with youth. And we can go into what that means for a whole hour podcast. But it's this idea that that's a fool's errand. You will never be able to achieve happiness if you are basing it on other people's opinions of you. But that's how both Elizabeth and Sue live their lives.
Right. Let's talk about the effects of it all, because this is like a huge prosthetic effects movie. There are definitely like digital touch-ups and some digital extremities and some digital blood, but for the most part, it's one of the great examples in 2020's filmmaking of like, no, we put him in the chair and put like 80 pounds of clay on them to haul around. How'd the effects work for you, Alex?
I was so enamored with, I want to get this right, monstrous Eliza Sue. What's her name at in the third act?
Yeah, I think you got it. Who? Spoiler to everyone.
Yes. Spoiler alert.
They create a third. There's a third.
One becomes three somehow.
There you go. The egg yolk splits in three.
Yeah. I was so enamored with it. Like, just this idea of, like, you know, the idea of, like, you know, the egg yolk splitting, like mitosis happening on like levels that it shouldn't, like, and producing these mutations. And then when I got out of the theater, I immediately look at Twitter and see what Twitter has to say about whatever film I just saw. After I log my letterbox, I don't want it to be tainted. I go and I check and see what they say. And I saw the photo of Margaret Qualley, like, in the fucking suit, where she's got like a head behind her, and like, I was so just like blown away that was a practical effect by and large. I'm sure, of course, you know, they, you know, zhuzhed it up and post a little bit, but it was so, I am so enamored and really honestly just willing to commend and give flowers to anyone in this day and age that's trying to do anything with practical effects. If they're trying to go, you know, non-Marvel route, I'm going to give them some applause in the very least.
Yeah. And I mean, one of the kind of irreplaceable things with the practical effects, especially in a body horror movie, is like, it's the weight of these things. That 80-year-old finger, when it taps on things, is heavier than all the other fingers. And I know that this is like such a minor thing in a movie where like people grow third heads or whatever, but in the like the second era of Sue using too much and Elizabeth having to be like, what's happened to me now? Just that creaky knee where she's in the chair and she's like trying to extend it.
Oh man.
I think it's because it's just like a little too real. Where it's just like, you're never going to grow a third head, but you can imagine being like, this knee's full of fluid and I have to straighten it out to pop it, to stand up, and it's not going.
Yes. Oh, it's like when you need to pop your elbow and you're like trying to like snap it because it just won't go. Oh man. Yeah, that was one of the moments in the theater where it was lots of looking behind hands and also lots of just lots of just guttural screaming.
I like it. Are there any other like little bits of viscera we should shout out? Any other particular little things you loved?
The teeth falling out, because of course teeth falling out, that being linked to like losing control, like not having autonomy, not being able to like eat and take care of yourself. That's like, I feel like a well played out topic in lots of different media. But I still loved when she had to do that big closed mouth smile for Dennis Quaid and the other old men. That to me, that was such a like mirror to mirror moment of like, it is one of those moments where I could see, oh yeah, this is getting a little bit repetitive. This theme of like putting on a brave face, even though you are literally deteriorating, trying to meet the beauty standards of today. Obviously that's like, hit home quite a lot. But for me, I feel like one of the moments that I see so much still on social media to this day of people posting that screen grab of Margaret Qualley with the huge fucking smile that's like not even reaching her eyes. That was one of the moments in performance too, where I was like, that there was a lot riding on that simple like face acting moment. And I feel like she really, really knocked it out of the park.
And right in there too, there's another like super inspired moment of direction, which is I think when the ear falls off, which is totally an homage to Cronenberg's The Fly, like when Goldblum loses his ear and he's like, oh, my ear. But you've never seen it from the first person where it falls off and then there's like wah wah wah. I thought was such a great because it's just instantaneous. Once the ear is off, you can't hear shit. I don't know if people know this, but that's what I learned from this movie. Do you think that this movie is antagonistic toward its audience, Alex?
That is such a great question, because I think obviously her on stage when everyone's witnessing the monstrosity of it all, and she's oozing out everywhere and spraying everywhere. There is this moment of like, oh, this is our fault. Like, it's because there is a demand for this constant feed of youth on screens that these stars are being pressured into performing for us in this way, or for changing themselves in this way for us. So there is some acknowledgement and indictment, I think, of like, this is the monstrosity in its actuality, is what you are requesting. This is what you are asking of these people, is monstrous Eliza Sue. And so I do think that there is, but I also think so much of what this movie stands for is creating a very relatable story. So much of what we are seeing in this is something that I think every single viewer can identify with on some level. It's not just, I think, a movie about the pressures that women go through. And I think that's really exemplified by the fact that the person who introduces her to the substance is a guy. Like, she has this experience of even meeting him as Elizabeth, meeting the hospital nurses, like younger or older self, the older version of him in that cafe when she sits down and sees him. And he says, are you missing time? Like, is he starting to steal from you yet?
Right.
There is this recognition of like, youth has this power over us, over everyone. Everyone wants it. Everyone is willing to milk it as long as they can by whatever means necessary. It's very, very Machiavellian, especially in Hollywood. And so I think as much as it's an indictment, it's also a recognition of saying, I'm no better than you. Like you feel this within yourself. So it's more an indictment, I think, on human nature. It's one of those more sociological horror movies to me rather than a specific call out of saying this needs to change. It's not like a Get Out to me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't know if there is a call to action. I think there are just like a few moments that I read is kind of like, oh, this is what you want, you fucking perverts? Well, here it is.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that the monster gives birth to just a disembodied boob seems to be like, is this the shape of body organ that you fuckers like?
Yes,
here's
literally.
one. Do you like it now?
Yeah, I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
It's just not going to be how you actually thought you were going to
Oh
get
my
it.
God.
It's very, very be careful what you ask for.
And I also think, too, like, the way that the Sue's aerobic show, Pump It Up, is shot.
Oh my God. Great point.
Is in my theater, one of the things I'll always remember is there was a couple somewhere behind me, a man and a woman. And at some point in the, the third minute of it just being like ass, crotch, ass, like it's so like in your face, so calling attention to like how these images are constructed. The guy just started kind of being like, so this movie's like kind of, it's got like some stuff going on. And she was like, shh, be quiet. But like he clearly felt like the movie was like confronting him in that moment, which I think it is with a male gaze for lack of like a more nuanced term, but just that kind of like if what you people want are just like these specific shapes and these specific angles, I'm going to give them to you so directly and so many times that you couldn't possibly be turned on by them. You would just feel sick about yourself.
Yes, uncomfy.
Yeah.
No, and I really think the way that they produced Elizabeth's show, Pump It Up, versus what is it with Sue? I forget. Or Sue Pump It Up. I forget what Elizabeth is.
Hers is I was sort of really interested in it because it is more like boomer women's empowerment. It reminded me of the tapes my mom would watch, like where they leave the show and she's like, next time, ladies, we're going to talk lateral abs. They're the most difficult to sculpt. And it was kind of like, well, that's like a problematic thing too, but it's delivered in a way that's like, we're going to do this together and we're going to learn.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yes.
Anyway, keep going.
No, I completely agree. I think that the way that it's shot, the way that they shoot Elizabeth's show, it's full bodied. You see her doing the movement. It's usually one camera angle, maybe two, maybe three, you know, but she's talking throughout the whole thing. It's not like how Sue's is. When Sue does it, it's like you said, entirely dehumanizing. They're showing just sections of her, like cuts of meat, literally.
Yep.
But they aren't showing her in total unless it's to show like her ass jiggling or whatever.
Right.
And she's not speaking throughout it. She's just doing the dances. There's no talking to the audience. There's no connection with women. It's also, I think, a little bit more clear in the audience that they're hailing with Sue's show. It's probably going to be more men than it's going to be more women wanting to, empower themselves through fucked up means, but still through means whatever they deem necessary.
The other cut of meat confrontational moment that I would call out is when Elizabeth is doing the French cooking, and there's this juxtaposition of just like Sue's butt with Elizabeth like sticking her arm in a turkey's asshole. And it's just like cutting back and forth between those two things. And it just feels so accusatory.
It does feel like, are you getting it now?
Yeah.
Are you getting it now, bitch? Like just hitting us over and over again. I can see, because that one, I feel like anyone that I've talked to, they're like, yeah, I really liked it, but it did feel like a lot.
Yes.
It felt grotesque. It felt over the top. And that to me is like, I completely agree, but I think that what Farji is trying to explain with this is that she's holding a mirror. She's saying, like, this is a one-to-one. This is the monstrous underbelly of the cosmetics and fitness and beauty industry. It's just you need it explained in a different light to see it for what it is.
Can you've kind of hit on this idea a few times. Can I tell you my sort of like journey with this movie from watch 1 to watch 2?
Please.
So I think on watch 1, I always appreciated the performances, the vision, the go for it, the just like, make people sit there while you shower them in body parts. I love that. But I was sort of like, okay, so if you want to do like a body horror film with where the themes are all right on the surface, which I think they are in this movie. Like, to say that this movie is about the pressures that Hollywood puts on women about their bodies, and that it is sort of like maddening and leads to self-hatred, like that's all right on the surface of this movie. And I was like, so to get that theme out, must it be 2 hours and 20 minutes of all of just kind of like building on that over and over again up until Elizabeth has to announce that she hates herself, which like, I know. I've been watching. So when I watched it a second time, I was like, I don't think like watching it more closely was the problem. I'm like, I think I want to try to watch it differently. Mm-hmm. And to the point that you were making about it being totally intentional that the characters don't look the same, I was like, let me think about more ways in which the things I'm like, the movie's missing. It's missing more characterization. It's missing sort of like setting detail. It's missing these things that I recognize from reality. Let me start to pretend that all of that's intentional and why. And so like the opening scene where you see Elizabeth's like Walk of Fame star kind of deteriorating over time. And in one of the things, like, it snows. And I'm like, well, everybody knows it doesn't snow on the holiday, but Coralie knows that as well. So like she's saying something about, I think this movie is set in a kind of, funhouse mirror fantasy land of 1981, but with like internet logic or lack thereof. And I think what made it click for me is like just yesterday, I was like on Instagram and I was in the worst part of Instagram. I was on the Explore tab. And after like, 5 minutes or something like that, I literally out loud was just like, I hate this. Like, why? Yeah. Why am I doing this? And I think that what clicked is like, I think that's the experience of watching Elizabeth, where like, if you approach it like a character where you're like, well, let me observe from this person's behavior and the way the exposition is built up around this character to figure out who they are and what they want. It's like, this movie doesn't give that to you. It gives you like a very frustrating person who doesn't know themselves and is just going to like spiral into pretty much like nothingness. Completely powerless to stop it, totally addicted to this thing, no perspective on who they are outside of this thing. And I was like, that's what it's like to be on social media. So the internet is not in this movie. And in fact, it's like all of these like anachronistic jokes about like how Sue, the height of fame is like hosting a New Year's Eve special. Like she's going to be on Dick Clark in 1979. And she like finds the classified ad in the newspaper to take over the thing, where it's like, these are such like analog, like so flagrantly analog things that like don't make sense with what fame means now. And I kind of became convinced that the joke, the transposition that Farji is making is like, this is what it would be like to watch yourself like be on Instagram over your shoulder every day, where you'd be like, why are you doing that? Why are you looking at that? That's just like trying to sell you something. That like in your right mind, you would just hate that, but you keep looking at it. What are you doing? And then like transposing that kind of, kerosene on your inferiority and superiority complex, and just being like, so this is what that mentality would look like if you threw it up in like old Los Angeles. And it looks insane. And it's just all of these disconnected rooms that don't seem real and don't connect. And it's not really about place. It feels like it's set in this like fake digital world that we interact with, except the internet's not in the movie. And that like unlocked it for me.
That is literally like seriously changing so much of how I view this, because that to me is like, how did I not notice that, first of all? But that's so true. Like all of this is happening in a way that it's not even probably how it happened for Elizabeth, but it's probably how she remembers it happening for herself. Of like, I found something in the classifieds in the newspaper, and I went and danced for these men in suits in a room with all of these other girls in suits, or all of these other girls in wearing practically nothing, dancing for these men in suits. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense in the modern world. Like, that wouldn't be how that process would happen. Even her having the billboard across from her apartment, who does a billboard anymore?
And if you had the amount of money she had, why would you ever have an apartment with a fucking billboard in front of it? And
that is such a good point.
I similarly became convinced that like the billboard is just the billboard's the computer. It's the
Yes.
phone, it's the computer that's not in the movie. Because when she's trying to go out on the date, it's the billboard that's almost like vibrating, like wah, 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 and she just like keeps coming back to it. And that's where she goes to like the pits of like, I can't even be around someone who likes me. Because this billboard, which is, again, totally illogical that it would even be there, keeps calling to her.
Yeah, no, that is so fascinating. Even just the idea that Sue would have a scheduled program, because I remember Elizabeth sitting down for this program to see her.
Yeah.
And like, even, like you were talking about the New Year's Eve special. What is this? Like, what year is this? That
Right.
is such a good point. It's such, the city of Los Angeles, quote unquote, is such an artifice. Because they're just trying to, that would be, because if I try to think about this movie done with social media playing a part, because it would obviously, of course, if it were done in an actual Los Angeles, I think that would become way too, not even just like hitting the nail on the head too much, but just become not even fun to watch anymore. It becomes too real in a way. The thing that I think is so fascinating about the substance is that you're right, this is never how this would play out in real life. Obviously, of course, with the whole, DNA, but even just the smallest, minutia of like, that's not how she would get a show. Like Dennis Quaid wouldn't see her and just be like, watching a whole TV wall of like also old TVs of just, her saying her name, Sue, just her lips. Like that's not real. Like all of this is such, it's like, showing, one of my favorite films is F for Fake. By Orson
You
Welles.
mentioned that.
And I think that it's like a film about trickery to show truth.
Mm-hmm.
There's something about showing the truth in all of this manufactured reality.
Yeah.
That it's like exactly like what you're saying earlier, like showing it in this funhouse mirror environment where it isn't exactly as it is all of these different elements blended together to show you something that you can recognize, but also see it as entirely different and gruesome and awful.
Yep. Yeah, when I stop thinking about it as I'm going to teach you something about the world and instead show you what I think your own impulses look like and show you how much you care about yourself at your peak moments of not looking out for yourself at all, then I was like, oh, I think I relate to this movie a lot more now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like an indictment on this like voyeur that we all have in our own heads.
Mm-hmm. That just has nothing to do with how we exist outside of that. It has nothing. You're like, where are Elizabeth's friends? There's no one she can talk to. She's so successful.
Yeah.
It's like when we are like fucking tunnel visioned on how we look or how people look on our phones, we don't have any friends. We don't have other relationships. It's just us in a locked room. So,
no, literally, like it, because so much of this is like almost like a one room, one location movie inside Elizabeth / Sue's apartment, or in that bathroom with the white subway tile.
Mm-hmm.
There is something about it being so sterile and confined and almost like a vacuum that's not even something that you're thinking about when you're watching it until after the fact of like, oh, there was no like regular, like she didn't even like have like a doorman or like, a driver or like any consistent normal person. The only random person that she had a connection with beyond Sue was that guy from high school.
Yeah. Yep.
Man, that is fascinating.
Well, thanks for entertaining it, and thank you for like nominating this movie in the first place. I was like,
oh my gosh,
The Substance, I get it, and then I watched it again. And I was like, The Substance, I think I get it in a different way.
Yeah.
And then I think the last one I have for you is, it dawned on me. So the Substance packaging, it comes with the hymns font, the specific, mail order drugs, too scared to see doctors, just get it shipped to your door. And it's all, it seems like it's meant to be dummy proofed, right? Like all the pouches are like a certain amount, so you know how much to feed the sleeping half of you, et cetera, et cetera. But it got me wondering, why is there more activator fluid if it will just explode your life and kill you and make a grotesque monster? Is that just because it's a plot, it needs to move forward, or do you read anything into that about the company of why they provide you extra activator fluid when it would only have such disastrous results?
Yeah, no, I do. I was wondering, because so much of also, you would think in a movie that's indicting, I would say this is one of the things that makes me believe that it's indicting more so human nature rather than the actual structures that abuse and monetize our insecurities. The company has such a minor role in this, even to the point where when she's calling them saying, oh, she's stealing time from me, the only response she ever gets, if she gets one, is you are one, So it does fascinate me that this company takes on almost an ambivalent role because they aren't doing anything to hurt her. They're just giving her the tools to do it herself.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of why there's more activator fluid or serum than there should be, is because that's how it also is with all of these, health and fitness industries and companies, is they aren't necessarily the ones at fault. They are, of course, giving us the tools to self-harm, but we're the ones picking up and putting the activator fluid into our spine or whatever the hell ourselves.
You're right. Yeah, I think of that with, any sort of companies selling vice is sort of should they know that our better nature wouldn't prevail because they're giving us a taste anyway? Probably. But yeah, you're right. There's such a version of this movie too where they would go hunt down the CEO of the company at the end.
Yes.
So I will get my resolution. And you're right. They're just they're not in the movie. They're if you can't figure this out,
you're on your own.
You're free to you're free to cancel at any time. Would you like to cancel? And
that is so true. That is so true that she can back out at any point, but it becomes a game of sunk costs.
Absolutely.
So you don't want to go back out after you've already it's not just my finger anymore. It's my body. I have to snap my knee to get up from my chair. Oh,
you can stop getting the fillers anytime you want, but I can't guarantee how your face will look after. That's on you.
Seriously, it becomes a game of increasing minimums.
Yeah, and if I go back to the internet corollary, and if I complain to Instagram about I'm addicted to Instagram, I wouldn't go grab Mark Zuckerberg by the shirt collar.
Yeah.
I would be hey, this is having a bad effect on me, and they would be you should definitely stop using it, man. And that would be it.
Yes.
It's just we already exist. We already exist in these tools. It's not about how they were created or who's in charge of them. They're just in the ether.
No, that is so fascinating. And once you start, it's on you to stop if you want to stop. There's nothing, you are your own worst enemy in that regard. But it's they take on no personal responsibility for having created the thing.
Right. Boy.
That's fascinating.
Alex, is this if you were making a list, would this be your favorite movie of the year?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. 100%. I'll save it. I haven't seen Wicked yet, but I don't think Wicked's topping this for me. I don't like musicals all that much.
So it would be a big surprise if it surpassed this.
Yeah, unless Wicked pulls out some body horror, I'm probably going to keep this one in my top spot.
Is Challengers hanging around your top 5 at all?
Honestly, I literally can't believe that Challengers came out this year. It feels like that happened like 3 years ago, but
April.
Challengers is definitely up there. You know what? Hold on. I have to look at my Letterboxd because there was actually just a movie that I saw that was directed by Jesse Eisenberg and I think maybe written by him as well. And it was him and Kieran Culkin.
A Real Pain.
So that was definitely one that was up there for me, especially because it wasn't a horror movie. I'm such a horror fan. It's really hard for me to appreciate things outside the genre.
Sure. Did you have any other like horror honorable mentions from this year?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, Longlegs.
Oh yeah, you like
really
Longlegs?
Fascinated by Longlegs. I definitely felt that there were some things that there were some holes that I didn't love. There were some things that I was, if his daughter's birthday was on the 14th, why wouldn't he be like, oh crap, I gotta go home, make sure my daughter doesn't get long legs? But I just couldn't understand that part. But I love Nicolas Cage too. I will always be a ride or die for Nicolas Cage. I mean, at least as an actor. Personally, I'm not going to vouch for him, but as an actor, he always really just shocks me with his breadth of skill.
Totally. And yeah, I mean, he's going for it 10,000% in that movie.
He never holds back. I'm trying to think of any others. Oh, I love Twisters.
Oh, me
Twisters
too. I enjoyed Twisters.
I was also, since I'm from Oklahoma, I was
yeah?
like, I feel like I'm like the cool, like hip kid now. So
everybody ask me your questions about F5s.
I literally wanted to set up like out in the theater, like with a little booth that's like, I'm from Oklahoma, ask me anything.
That's awesome.
I've lived it.
I'm from Nebraska, so I felt a similar kind of thing. But you know what? Oklahoma's like really tornado alley, so I think you still win in terms
Nebraska, y'all need some representation, some film representation. What have you got? I actually don't know of anything.
We have Alexander Payne's Nebraska.
Oh yes. Oh, how could I forget?
We have it's not a lot. Is it only Alexander Payne movies? Because he's from Omaha, where I'm from.
I'm so curious. I'm gonna look this up.
Yeah, what are the other big Nebraska movies? It's always just it reflects life. It's just like people driving through.
Something Take Me to the River from 2015. It's on Tubi.
Never heard of that.
Snack Shack. Oh, 1922. The Stephen King horror about them like going.
Oh, okay. How about Oklahoma movies? What do you have?
Oh, so I know that we have obviously, of course, Twisters, both of them.
Yep.
Killers of the Flower Moon. We had a good year for Oklahoma.
There you go.
Maybe not a good PR year, but just hey, any PR for Oklahoma is good. We don't get anything.
There you go.
Oh yeah, there's some good ones.
Nice.
Outsiders.
Oh yeah, because all those S.E. Hinton books are set in Tulsa, right?
Yeah, something like that.
Rumblefish and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, there you go. That's a little bit of much needed forgotten Midwestern state movie representation.
They don't think about us. They gotta remember
They don't
it.
think about us. Yep. So we need to move away and then later talk about films that were made. Films that were made.
I'm doing
there.
my part.
I'm not going back, but I'm happy to be an ambassador for Twisters.
Oh yeah, God no, but I'll put something in my letterbox.
Fantastic. Well, Alex, it was great to catch up with you. Thanks again for picking this movie. It was fun to break down.
No, thank you so much for having me, Chance. This was a blast.